The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Oh, never a dull moment in the UFC in Las Vegas, is there, Ian, as we head into another UFC fight night at the Apex in Las Vegas. And just when you thought you've seen it all, Paulo Costa shows up for a middleweight fight against Marvin Vettori, saying he weighs 211 pounds. He's just not going to make weight. He doesn't want to make weight. They're going to change this. As of right now, the taping, we are taping this. We still don't even know what weight this fight is going to be competed at, but they say it's going to be a catchweight. Those discussions are ongoing, but both sides have said that they will take the fight. And during an interview with me, they agreed to 195 pounds. We'll see if it's 195. Ian, before we get into all the breakdowns and all the gambling advice, what do you make of this situation in the main event?
Look, never a dull moment with Paulo Costa to begin with, and to come into fight week at that weight, saying I'm not going to cut it, and then kudos to Marvin Vettori. This guy will fight at heavyweight, super heavyweight. He doesn't care. You know, how much it's going to impact the way we bet this. We'll definitely get into that. But for me, I question Paulo Costa's mental situation right now. I guess it's good that you and Marvin Vettori were able to explain to him how weight classes work. I wasn't aware at this point in his career that was even a question. You know, like you said, that's a whole different ballgame here. But as long as we get the fight, I guess that's all that matters, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. As long as we get the fight, I suppose that is all that matters. It has been kind of a fun week as much as it's been a strange week. So there are some betting ramifications, of course, with what's going on. But let's talk about the prelims before we get to that main event. And it is a long list of prelims for UFC Fight Night this weekend. I mean, you look at the amount of fights that are on the prelims. You're only seeing 4 of them here. But it's a busy card. We're going to get a lot of fights on Saturday. You got Kamaru facing Jai Herbert, lightweight bout. Jeff Molina taking on a late replacement against Daniel Lacerda. And now you're seeing the rest of the prelims here. The top one, Park Jun-yong facing Gregory Rodriguez. That is the prelim main event, if you will. But yep, certainly a lot of fights to talk about, Ian, and we're going to rapid fire through all of them. I mean, let's start with the very first one. Jonathan Martinez versus Zavad Lazishvili. This is another one, man. Late notice of replacement. Jonathan Martinez was supposed to fight Aaron Phillips. So late that we don't even have a betting line on this fight. So this is really going to test what you know about these guys, Ian, because you are going to try to give advice without even an opening line, and then we'll find out how right you are when that line comes out.
I love a good challenge to start the card, right? So look, Jonathan Martinez, we have seen him. He was once a good prospect, top prospect, and then he gets knocked out by Davey Grant. And, you know, for those of you that don't know, Lazishvili, I definitely probably butchered that name. He's a stud, bantamweight champ out of LFA. Excellent fighter, great grappler, good striking. I think this is a terrible matchup for Jonathan Martinez on late notice. And I believe that Lazishvili will be the favorite at some point when we do get a line. Depending on how high that is, I would lean that way. Again, if you've seen his work in LFA, stylistically wise, this is going to be a problem for Jonathan Martinez.
Are you confident enough? Because I think that's going to catch a lot of people off guard, right? Some people are going to look at this and say, oh, I know Jonathan Martinez. I don't know Lazishvili, and it's a short notice fight. Are you confident in taking Lazishvili as a favorite, or would you prefer to sit this one out and just watch his UFC debut?
For me, it's going to really be where the line is. If this is anything over minus 190, I would kind of sit back and maybe even, you know, just pump the brakes to your point right there. Sometimes the best bet is the one we don't make. However, for me, for Jonathan Martinez, you know, I'm actually surprised that this matchup is where he's allowing to happen. You know, in short notice, I get it, you want to fight, but sometimes these short notice fights, even when you're the person who's been in camp, not always the best take. I am confident in who will win this, but again, when it comes to the betting side of it, to your point, Brett, and you make a very good point, if it's anything above minus 190, I would stay away.
Okay, so 190 is sort of a number to keep an eye on there. Let's move up to a strawweight fight between Lavinia Souza, the Brazilian gangster, versus Randa Marcos. Souza, She has been a favorite in each of her UFC fights except for one, and that is the case here. She is minus 130 according to Caesars. Randa Marcos, this is a must-win for her, man. Coming off of that 20th season of The Ultimate Fighter, she's had a long career in the UFC, but she has lost 4 now in a row. So you would think that this is an absolute must-win, coming as a small underdog at plus 110. Which side do you like on this one?
This is tough with Randa Marcos. I thought the last 3 fights were a must-win, to be honest with you. I think for her being on The Ultimate Fighter is also why they've kept her around for as long as they have. And she always comes out, she tries to win. Stylistically, though, this is tough again. This is someone who really used to rely on their wrestling, then gets comfortable throwing 1 or 2 punches at a time. Now, I would not really depict Souza's career based on that last fight where she got knocked out pretty quickly. I think Souza's the better fighter here, way better striker. If she can keep this fight on the feet, which I think she can, Marcos' takedown attempts are a little too predictable at this point in her career. Her striking just isn't much of a threat, so I lean Souza in this fight, unfortunately, because I do think Marcos is talented. I just think she's got away from her identity of being a strong grappler, and we're going to go with Souza.
Okay, moving up to a flyweight fight between Jeff Molina, who comes out of that camp that I know both of us like, Glory MMA, coached by James Krause. He's fighting Daniel Lacerda. Molina, 24, has won 8 in a row. Lacerda, kind of an unknown, coming in from Brazil. He's also young, 25. What do you make of this matchup, Ian?
You know what? I do like Molina here. I think he's a very well-rounded fighter. I like his skill set. And to your point, James Krause, one of the best coaches out there. I think he comes prepared. You know, for Lacerda, he's a very aggressive fighter. And with a guy like Molina who could sit on his punches, who also has the ability to grapple, and he's got a great cardio. And if he's able to dictate the pace of this fight, I think Molina wins. So we're going to go that way here.
Okay. Interesting fight coming up next, lightweight. Jai Herbert, who was a former Cage Warriors champion coming out of England, he is the favorite here at minus 175. Kama Worthy, man, he came into the UFC. I remember this fight very well because he was facing a guy that he knew, a former teammate, Devontae Smith. It was in Pennsylvania. He was a plus 640 underdog in that fight, knocked him out. It was one of the most memorable things that I've witnessed going back the last 2 years, man. What a performance by Worthy. But he's 1-2 in the UFC sense. And again, you know, I don't want to call it fluke, but that was, he hit lightning in a bottle there with plus 640 as an underdog. He is coming in at plus 150 here in this fight against Herbert. How do you break down this matchup?
I think this is actually a good place for him as an underdog here. You know, we've seen the fight against Smith. We saw the fight, you know, where he also won by guillotine in his next fight. And then we saw him fall victim to a knockout loss. And for me, for Kama Worthy here, I think his back's against the wall. I think for him, that rise to success in the UFC because he was such a huge underdog may have been too much too soon. You know, and then the matchups he had after that were very difficult. Sometimes when you push guys too quick, this happens. Jai Herbert's coming off 2 losses himself. You know, I think that this is going to be a striking battle, and I think where Worthy actually could separate himself is by putting Herbert on his back and doing work grappling. We've seen him grapple. We've seen that he's got the ability. We've seen he has submissions wins in his career. I like Kama Worthy here. It's now or never for him. For both guys, really. I just think that Worthy's got more tools. I think he's also fought better level competition, minus Herbert, you know, losing to Moicano. I like Kama Worthy here at plus 150. I think it's a good spot to take a dog.
Well, I think bettors are going to like that, man. Anytime you can get plus money, their ears perk up and they want to take those underdogs. And I think you are getting a good one with some finishing power in Kama Worthy. Let's move on to this one, man. Middleweight fight between Jamie Pickett and Laureano Staropoli. Pickett, man, the UFC they've given him every opportunity, right? I mean, they let this guy fight on the Contender Series 3 times, lost his first 2, got it done in the 3rd one. He's 0-2 since winning that fight on Contender Series, fighting a guy in Staropoli who has also lost 3 in a row, 28 years old. I was a little surprised by this line, I guess. Even though Pickett has failed to sort of get it done in the octagon, he is plus 200 against Staropoli. What do you think of this matchup, and what do you think of the line being where it is?
Yeah, you really read my mind there. I think the line is a little crazy for both guys being where they're at in their UFC careers. You know, and I don't mind if people take a shot on Pickett, but to me, where I think the value is that this fight goes over the 2.5 or goes the distance, you know, at around, I think it's minus 175 at this point. Both guys I don't see finishing each other. I know Pickett got finished in his last fight, but Staropoli doesn't really carry that same type of knockout power. So for those that want to take a shot on Jamie Pickett, I understand plus 200 in a fight where the line is so wide, where it shouldn't be. I get it. But at minus 175 for either guy to win, but going the distance for me is the value play, and that's where we're going to go with this one.
Okay, I like that. I like that take because, again, I think the line struck me as a little odd, but Pickett has got to show that he can win a fight here in the UFC because he just hasn't been able to do so yet. Let's look at that strawweight fight next between Tabitha Ricci versus Maria Oliveira. Tabitha is a minus 240 favorite despite losing her UFC debut, but hey, that was to Manon Fior, who Manon Fior is making everybody look bad out there. She's gotten a lot of hype behind her name in a short amount of time. She's facing Oliveira, who has mostly fought out of Brazil, but she does have some experience in Ryzen. She's fought overseas. She was also on the Contender Series. So, what can you tell me about these two strawweights who have been around for a little bit, but we haven't seen a whole lot of them yet in the UFC?
I think Ricci is the deserving favorite here. This is another fight where I think the line is a lot wider than I would expect. I understand the level of competition. I understand she has had success outside the UFC. For me, if you're going to take Tabitha Ricci, which I'm assuming most would favor in the spot, and rightfully so, I would look for a line that would get Ricci to win by decision. I don't see her finishing Oliveira. I'm not even going to go based on her last fight against Fior, where, like you said, Fior's been picking apart everybody and picking up a lot of steam. For me, I think Ricci wins this. Again, not seeing her fight UFC level competition yet. It's hard to really go off a line of minus 240. But again, if you want to take a stab, my best advice would be by decision, because a lot of these fights in the women's division at that weight class get there. That's where I would go if I had the chance.
Okay, I'm excited to talk about this next guy, man. At 155 pounds, I don't know what we can talk about in terms of this particular matchup. Mason Jones, at some point, I think is going to be a pretty popular guy in this UFC. I mean, I just think he's got the character, he's got the charisma, he's got the background. He fights well. His fighting style is exciting. He's just kind of had a little bit of a start and go career so far. He had the unfortunate no contest against Alan Patrick in his last fight. He was supposed to fight Alan Patrick again here. Patrick withdraws, and now you get UFC newcomer David Onama, who fights out of Missouri, also fights under Glory MMA. Again, man, I think Mason Jones is going to be something, and I'm excited to talk about him in the future. But at minus 440 against David Onama on short notice, is there a way to bet this fight?
There is. Look, I agree with you. I think Mason Jones is a very exciting prospect here. I think his fight against Alan Patrick was great. Unfortunately, the no contest situation was difficult, especially for Jones, but he was dominating that fight. He looked absolutely fantastic. So for me, if you're going to take Mason Jones, you take him here inside the distance. You're getting it under minus 200 for this against a guy in Onama who is going to want to stand. And for Mason Jones, that aggression, that pressure, he's got a great chin on him. I like Mason Jones there. Again, minus 440 is tough. We don't bet those straight. It's too risky. It's MMA. Anything could happen. But to win inside the distance is the way to go for me. I'm not passing up on action with Mason Jones. You got to get in there. This guy's going to get it done, and that's going to be the way to do it. And also, he will be part of our parlay later on. We're going to maximize as much value as we can off of him.
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point about getting him inside the distance, he is the kind of guy, like I said, who understands that sometimes winning a decision against a guy coming in on short notice on these odds is not enough. So I think Mason Jones will be looking for a finish in this fight. So we'll see if he gets it done and he can get you to the window with a ticket if you like him inside the distance. Okay, let's talk about the final fight on the preliminary portion of this card. It is a middleweight bout between Park Jun-Yong versus Gregory Rodriguez. If you've been betting on Jun-Yong, you've been doing pretty well because he's on a 3-fight win streak, and his odds are mostly even in his fights. He's in these competitive matchups, and he's finding ways to win. He's fighting a guy in Rodriguez, the RoboCop, Michael Bisping with one of the great calls in his Contender Series fight. Unfortunately, he lost that fight, but that was a memorable call by Michael Bisping. Who do you like in this one, Park? Again, very close odds. Minus 115 against Rodriguez, who is minus 105.
I actually like Rodriguez here. I was really impressed with his debut in the UFC. He came in as an underdog, and he absolutely did what he said he was going to do. For Park, he's got to get this fight to the floor. He does his best work when he's on top, and he's got ground and pound, and he really believes in position over submission. I don't know if he's going to get Rodriguez to the ground here. I think Rodriguez is physically going to be way stronger here, and I think he carries a lot of power. I like Rodriguez in this fight. I'm actually surprised he's minus 105. I thought it would have been maybe an underdog here because Park's been in the UFC a little bit longer. Like you said, winning the 3-fight win streak. One of those fights, he was extremely dominant. He landed an absurd amount of strikes. I think it was against Phillips, if I'm correct. But again, styles make fights. Rodriguez keeps his fight standing, and he gets the win on the feet. I like Rodriguez.
All right, Ian, that will wrap up the prelims. As I mentioned, let's get to this 6-fight main card on Saturday from the UFC Apex here in Las Vegas. It kicks off with a 205-pound bout between Nikolai Moreno and Ike Villanueva. You got Francisco Trinaldo, who is, this guy's just going to fight forever, fighting Dwight Grant. Caceres on the card against Singwoo Choi. Jessica Rose Clark comes back from a long layoff, an ACL tear against Jocelyn Edwards. Grant Dawson, Ricky Glenn in that co-main event spot at 155 pounds. And then the aforementioned catchweight main event. Again, we still don't know. Maybe 195, maybe 198, maybe 200. Whatever Marvin and Paulo decide on by Friday is where they're going to fight. So let's go ahead and start off with that light heavyweight fight. As I mentioned before, Nego Moreno versus Villanueva. Nego Moreno, pretty significant favorite here, minus 220, or at least a sizable favorite against Villanueva, coming back at plus 180. What do you see in this matchup?
I like Nikolai here. His last fight against Aleska Kamer was extremely impressive. He was able to dominate everywhere when he was a sizable underdog against a very tough prospect in Kamer. And for me, Villanueva either knocks you out or he's a human punching bag. That's just his style of fighting. I think Nikolai gets it done here. I actually like him to win inside the distance. I just think that his pressure, his volume, and his pace is going to be too much for Ike Villanueva. And this is another guy we're going to put into our parlay later. And he's only minus 220, so we'll get 2 opportunities to play him. But if you're going to go with Nikolai, inside the distance is where it's going to be for me. I don't see Villanueva going full 3 rounds in any fight ever.
Yeah.
Win or
I mean,
lose.
I think at this point in Villanueva's career, and hey, Villanueva kind of says this about himself, is that if you can minimize mistakes, and as long as you don't, if you can minimize mistakes and you're not one of those guys that's going to gas out and sort of beat yourself, you should be able to beat Villanueva. But if you are one of those guys that's going to fall victim to a cardio, a fast pace, a guy who's going to be in there for the full 15 minutes, then Villanueva is going to get a chance to beat you. I mean, this guy has a lot of heart. He understands that he's later in his career. Some of these guys have more skills, have more talent than him, but he's got a lot of heart and he's going to test their willpower. So if Nego Moreno, if you've seen some goodwill out of him and some ability to limit mistakes, he should be able to win this fight, especially, obviously, the odds say that he should. Okay, Francisco Trinaldo at welterweight against Dwight Grant. Trinaldo, 43 years old. He's still favored over the young bucks here. I mean, I can't even call Grant a young buck. He's 37, but he's young compared to a 43. Trinaldo's second fight this year. Dwight Grant fighting out of AKA. Again, Trinaldo minus 135. What do you think of this fight?
Trinaldo's 43 going on 25, it feels like. This guy's nickname should be the Fountain of Youth. And you know what? In each fight, he seems to get better, and he seems to, once in his career, he was more of a ground guy, and now with the striking, he's standing up, he's landing body kicks. For me, I don't really want to pick either side here because the way Dwight Grant fights, he could easily outpoint Trinaldo. And the way Trinaldo fights, he kind of sits back on his punches. He throws the body kicks. He waits. He doesn't utilize his ground game as much anymore. So for me, I think this fight's going to go over 2.5 rounds. I think it's going to go the distance. And that's where I would play this. Trinaldo doesn't come forward a ton. He sits there. He plays more defense. He counter strikes. And with Grant loves that jab. But the jab usually doesn't knock people out. And Trinaldo does a great job. He's got a good chin. He has not been finished very much in his career at all. And he hasn't gotten too many knockouts either. So for me, over 2.5 rounds, whoever wins, I think it goes to that length, at minus 175. I like the value there.
All right, let's talk about a featherweight fight here, Ian, and you can tell me if you can make sense of Alex Caceres, because I got to believe there are some people out there who, if you have tried to bet Alex Caceres' career, I don't know. Maybe he's consistently inconsistent. I don't know. I would like to hear from you. But he's 18-12, so that record doesn't jump off the page at you. But he's been in the UFC for a long time. He's fought a lot of good people. He's at a plus 230, so there's certainly value on him. And with all that experience and the cage time that he has, going against Choi, who comes back at minus 280. Choi 3-2 in the UFC, but his losses have come to pretty good opponents, man. I like Gavin Tucker. I like Movsar Evloev. Those are the 2 men that he's lost to so far in the UFC. What do you make of this matchup?
For me, Caceres, this is a tough one for him, man. We know he's got that karate style. He also is pretty solid jiu-jitsu, but it's not as threatening anymore. He's just good defensively. He doesn't get submitted very often. We saw him obviously get submitted by Uriah Faber, and when he beat Chase Hooper, it was more along the lines of, hey, keep the fight standing, and that's probably one of the times that he was the way better striker in that fight. But for here, I think Choi is the real deal. The two guys you mentioned that he lost to are phenomenal prospects that are, I mean, look where they are right now. And I think for Choi, this is a good fight for him to get back on track. I think he's going to carry the power. I think he will be the more technical striker. And I think for Caceres, it's just we haven't seen too much of an evolution in his game, too many improvements. He sticks to who he is. You know, he's smiling while he gets punched in the face. He doesn't get tired, so maybe, you know, for him, cardio is the way to go, but he doesn't throw a ton of volume. He seems to always be fighting on the defense, and it gets a guy in Choi who's got crazy power at this weight. I like Choi here, and he's going to be part of our parlay too. As much as I love Bruce Leroy, I can't take a shot here at the underdog. It's just, I just think he's running into a really bad matchup.
Okay, so moving from the men's featherweight division, we go to the women's bantamweight division. Another really interesting fight to try and break down. You got Jessica Rose Clark, who it's her third appearance in bantamweight since moving up from flyweight. But it's her first appearance again in a long time. First appearance this year because she's coming off of that ACL injury a year ago. And she's fighting someone in Edwards who's 26 and who is going to have a significant height and reach advantage here at 135 pounds. How do you see this fight breaking down stylistically, and is there value potentially on Edwards at plus 135, or do you like Clark at minus 160 coming off of a long layoff?
You know what? I'll start with Edwards first. Excuse me. I do think for Edwards, the range will be there, you know, and she's a good striker, but she's fighting someone, Jessica Clark, who's also a very skilled kickboxer, but has that ground game. I think Jessica Rose Clark has got a high fight IQ. We saw it in the fight against Sarah Alpar, where she knew to get the fight to the ground. Even though she was having success on the feet, when the fight got to the ground, the advantage was just so crazy. That was where the space really happened. And here, she's a smart fighter. She's got a great coach, and I think her IQ is going to play a whole thing. She doesn't have an ego. She does want to get the finish. She loved the way that last fight ended, but in order to do that, she's got to get Edwards on the ground. Doesn't want to make this a stand-up fight, because if she does, I'm not worried about her getting finished, but the front kick, you know, that jab of Edwards can score points, and when you leave it to the judges, we've seen that be a whole other problem in the last, forever with the judges. But that's here nor there. I think for Clark, she wins this fight. I think this is a good matchup for her to come back to, building her up. She gets the fight to the floor. If she does, that's where she dominates, and I do like her at minus 160.
Ian, real quick, how do you look at layoffs, man? When you're trying to decipher, you know, what these guys are going to look like on or off a layoff, what kind of goes into your mind of way of thinking when you're trying to bet these situations?
For me, it depends on has the person been through this before? And how did they respond prior to that? On top of that, the length. You know, we talked about Aspen Ladd, who didn't fight since 2019, also being very young and having a pretty major surgery on her knee. That sometimes comes with a level of experience. How do you bounce back? You talk about guys like Dominic Cruz, where we haven't seen ring rust really mean anything because the way he just bounced back from injuries, the way he trained, the support behind him. I think for Jessica Rose Clark, you know, for her, we saw her have an injury prior to her last fight, and that's why I'm not so scared to bet her. You know, before that fight with Sarah Alpar, she had another significant injury where she was out for, I believe, 10 months to a year also. So she's not completely unfamiliar with this layoff. You know, if you pay attention to these fighters, you see their history of injuries and how they bounce back. I think that's where you really play to the factor here. So I'm okay with that with Jessica Rose Clark.
All right, good stuff, man. Let's get to this co-main event between Grant Dawson and Ricky Glenn. And I think the sport in general is high on Grant Dawson right now. I think the betting community is high on Grant Dawson right now, and you see that reflected in the odds, right? Minus 380 to a veteran in Ricky Glenn. I mean, this guy has nearly 30 fights. It's a good record, 22-6-1. I think he's dangerous. He has finishing ability, but people love Grant Dawson, man, including the betting community. Do you love him in this fight at these odds?
You know, up until that last fight where Rick Glenn won pretty quickly and unexpectedly, for me, we've seen Grant Dawson get himself in a little bit of trouble when he gets careless with his punches trying to get the takedown. And we've seen that chin a little high. I'm assuming, and I hate to assume, but that his coaches are on it. They've corrected that, because if he gets the fight to the floor, where I really think it's going to happen, I think that's where he just takes over control. Now, he's not the biggest finisher in fights, and Rick Glenn is not an easy guy to finish. So for me, yeah, you know, minus 380 is high. So again, someone who will go in a parlay. But if you want to bet him individually, I think that he wins by decision. You know, I think sometimes when guys are a prospect, after that last fight where I think he won, the last second, which made a huge difference. He knows that he just needs this win. He needs to show dominance. And if he can't get the finish, I think he's going to try and stay away from Glenn's power we've seen on the feet. So for me, Dawson by decision, and then again, we'll rope him into a parlay later on. But I'm high on him too. I think he's an excellent fighter.
All right, well, let's get to that parlay right now because as I've been told that it does not include the main event, which I think is the right call. I would not want to, with all of the shenanigans going around on the main event. Let's go ahead and just wrap up that parlay right now. Lay it all out for us, Ian. What is the parlay and what does it pay us?
Yeah, we're going to go Mason Jones, Nikolai Negumereanu. We're going to go with Choi. And then last but not least, we're going to go with Grant Dawson. That's going to give you plus 206. So 2-1 on your money, getting 4 of the heavier favorites on the card. But look, minimum risk, solid reward. And I do feel pretty comfortable about all 4 of these guys getting it done. And you don't have to worry about the method if you go parlay there.
All right, so there is our parlay. We got 4 of them on there. Looks good to me. Let's get into this main event that we've been teasing all day. And in order to kick us off, we will kick to that interview when I spoke with both of them at the same time, which was pretty interesting. Here, take a look.
I'm ready to fight Saturday. Marvin or some another guy. I don't care. I don't care for weight. I don't care for who are you. I need to face on Saturday. I hope Marvin came to Saturday to fight and we bring a great show.
Well, Paulo, I have follow-up questions there, but I want to ask you.
I have a question for him. Like, how is that even possible that, like, we're supposed to fight at 185 and he comes in a week out, you come in a week out over 215 pounds. How was that possible?
And which weight you supposed to be on Friday? You make on Friday 185, one. I don't care for you weigh 185, 195, 205. Your choice.
I don't care too. I mean,
It's up to you.
It's getting funny, bro. Like, what the like? I don't even know what to say. Like
which weight? Which weight do you want to fight? 195, 205, or
195.
Or are you here to?
Can you make 195?
Can you make
195? Can you make 195? Listen, the last thing I want is
195 is good.
You're lucky that you found a real fighter.
Don't make excuse.
You're lucky that you find a real fighter.
Don't make excuse to avoid this fight.
It sounds like for now you guys have agreed to 195 pounds.
I am professional. I make the dough. You're not professional. You're not gonna make the dough. I'll make it for you.
Oh, well, that was a memorable interview, to say the least, between these two. And as you can imagine, the line has shifted a little bit with everything going on this week. When it opened on October 9th, Marvin Vettori was a slight favorite, minus 125, Costa coming back at plus 105. Immediately, the line did start to move in Vettori's favor up to minus 150 when everything started to happen on Wednesday. And then once these guys had that interview and committed to a weight, current line is minus 160. Paulo Costa coming back at plus 135 again after he opened at plus 105. Let's just say they're going to fight at some weight around 195, 200, okay? And now we know sort of the demeanor and this lack of remorse that Paulo is showing. He's like, what weight do you want to fight at, Marvin? Like, Marvin's like, how about the one that we signed a contract to a few months ago? But the weight will be somewhere between 195 and 200. What do you make of, from a betting perspective, what do you make of what's going on here?
I apologize for continuing to laugh. I can't get out of my head Paulo Costa's response, just deflecting. Like, he came into fight week and he's like, hey, listen, I'm here. Where do you want to fight? Like you just said. The reverse psychology is if Marvin Vettori, like, they came here, like, we're going to fight. We don't know what we're going to do yet. We don't know where we're going to weigh. And Vettori's cracking up because he can't believe that this guy's real response. I'm looking at your face. I feel like you and Marvin were on the same page. I think anyone with a brain's on the same page here, that Costa just is clearly just doesn't care. And because Vettori wants to fight, he's kind of taking advantage of the situation. Look, I love Marvin Vettori's mentality here that he's willing to fight. I hope he's smart. I think anything above 195, he's doing Costa a favor. I think he should make him cut weight. I know he wants to fight. I'm curious, from 211, where is he even at today? Did he start the cutting process at all? He just seems like, I don't even know what was in that cup. Was he drinking wine again at this point? I have no idea with Paulo Costa. I just think for Vettori, though, if you want to shift all the, like you said, shenanigans to the side, I think Vettori, what he has shown us is the volume, his cardio. I think coming forward is how he wins this fight. Paulo Costa relies on his power. He does not throw a ton of volume, and I think for Vettori, he does have to wrestle a little bit, especially if Costa is not going to cut as much weight where it could impact his cardio. And Costa's a tough guy to get down, but if Marvin can do it, steal a couple of rounds, tire him out, and he's got the ability to do so, I do like Marvin Vettori here. I think skill-wise, he's got more tools to win. Avoid the power, hopefully wrestle, and we're going to go with Marvin Vettori.
Ian, I'm scared. I'm scared to bet this fight, man, just because I don't know. And I think if I was looking to bet this main event, I might wait to see what Paulo looks like on the scale. What kind of 211 pounds is he? Because I will say that I agree with you that Marvin has more ways to win the fight. I believe that he was the favorite for a reason, but I also believe that some of the ways in which he has to win the fight, takedowns, wrestling, may be more difficult with a guy who's fighting at light heavyweight in Paulo Costa. So if Costa's kind of just being sneaky with us here, and he is in good shape, he just didn't feel like cutting weight, it could be a massive advantage for him. But I will say, just trying to read their demeanors, yeah, I get it's a fair question of whether or not Paulo Costa even wants to be here this week. So does that give you any pause? Are you scared off at all by the reasons that I just laid out?
Marvin Vettori's sitting there like Ivan Drago, as confident as ever, and he, you make a really good point. When guys don't just say, I'm not cutting the weight, it does take the pressure off. Now the pain and the misery of going through the weight cut gets released from their mental situation here. So yeah, it does give me a little bit of a pause with that, because to your point, what if we see a full out Paulo Costa healthy, just not having to cut the weight? Does that give him an advantage? It does, but it also might take away from his speed. We don't know, to your point, is this healthy weight that he's carrying? So we know all these guys are heavier than what they walk around at. For me, though, I got to go with Vettori's confidence. I got to go with the overall game. Even if he doesn't wrestle, I think his volume and cardio is what can get it done here against Costa. So, listen, I'm going Marvin Vettori regardless of whether Costa looks fat or if he looks like Thor on that scale. We're still going Marvin Vettori here.
All right, good discussion on the main event. We'll be interested to see how this line continues to move through Thursday, Friday, and then right up until the fight. So let's go ahead and get your best bets. Ian, you did well last week. You were 2-1. Your best bets this week.
Mason Jones, you and I both agree, top prospect, taking on someone who's fighting him on short notice. We saw that last fight. If that fight didn't end due to a no contest, he would have finished it quick. He does it again this week. I like Jessica Rose Clark here. I think she gets that fight to the ground like her last fight, gets it done against the striker in Jocelyn Edwards. And last but not least, we just talked about it, I'm going with the very confident Marvin Vettori over Paulo Costa in the main event.
Wow, not only just taking Vettori, he made him one of his best bets. All right, well, it's coming up on ESPN Plus Saturday. The prelims start at 1 p.m. Eastern. The main card starts at 4 p.m. Eastern. Again, a lot of fights to get through. 8-fight card as of right now on the prelims, and then 6 more coming your way on the main card. And that is not all. Following this week, we will be in Abu Dhabi next week, Fight Island. I will be there. I'm headed out. I'm actually taking the red eye off of Marvin Vettori and Paulo Costa. I'm headed to New York, and then I'm going to Abu Dhabi to see another 6-fight main card. A lot of interesting names on here. Volkan Oezdemir versus Magomed Ankalaev. That's an intriguing fight. Khamzat Chimaev comes back, minus 440 there against Li Jingliang. Heavyweight fight. Lightweight bout between the Savage Dan Hooker and Islam Makhachev. Hooker, the homeless man, he can't even get back into his home country. He's hanging out in Las Vegas before he can go to Fight Island and take on Islam Makhachev. And then Petr Yan facing Corey Sandhagen for the interim title. And then, of course, Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira. Great story there for the light heavyweight championship. Jan coming off of some big performances over the last 2 years. So before we wrap things up, Ian, just your initial thoughts on what we're going to see next week.
Well, the odds are really high, so we're probably going to have to lean towards our props, our parlays. One that stuck out to me was Ankalaev. I think he will get it done. Look, Volkan Oezdemir is becoming a gatekeeper at this point. I'm very curious to see where Ankalaev is. This is a good test for him. The return of Chimaev fighting the Leech, that's going to be a lot of fun. And, Jan Blachowicz, let's see if he can continue his dominance in this division. It's going to be an exciting card. And also, Petr Yan versus Corey Sandhagen, that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way to finish up the year, man, really, when you think about 267, 268 coming up the following week after that. 269 is an absolutely stacked pay-per-view. And then even the fight nights, you look at these main events. Paulo versus Marvin is a terrific fight. You got Max Holloway coming back in November. Jose Aldo and Rob Font are fighting in December. So a lot of good fights to look forward to the rest of the year. And we will be talking about all of them from a betting perspective to close out 2021. For Ian Parker, for the guys in the control room, we thank you for watching and enjoy the fights this weekend. Take care.